What is blues music all about? What is ragtime music made of? The composition of both genres are tied into the St. Louis culture and give it its persona back in the early 19th century, as people in St. Louis with musical talents formed the original building blocks of the blues and ragtime. Ragtime. Ragtime was the essence of happiness as it revived the black communities by it being rhythmic and uplifting. Musicians in the city of St. Louis during the 1800s included the king of ragtime, Scott Joplin. Scott Joplin visited St. Louis and flourished in his music career.
Ragtime is a type of music that is considered the first American popular pop music. It was a sort of a joyous music, so people would dance to it, so it was an uplifting type of music. Now, everybody wasn't happy about it. A lot of people who were churchgoers considered it bad music because it was played in taverns, but we know that's where people go to have fun. A lot of times is a tavern, a bar, a club, those types of places. So it was essentially the party music of its day. It really flourished in Missouri as the primary place, but during 1904, it had been introduced to the world at the World's Fair in Chicago that preceded the World's Fair in St. Louis. But by 1904, it was really going and continued up until probably Scott Joplin's death in 1917. And so by then, blues had started to take over. St. Louis was very significant in the development of ragtime, and Missouri was very significant. Scott Joplin's first stopping off in Missouri was in Sedalia, Missouri, where he wrote the Maple Leaf Rag, along with about 3 or 4 other pieces of music. None was as popular as Maple Leaf Rag in the Sedalia area, but that's where he gets his real start and his real recognition. Once he gets to St. Louis, he already is an established composer and teacher and writer of ragtime music. So here he writes The Entertainer, which we still hear today on the ice cream truck. That's one of the tunes that they play. And, so ragtime was very important. In St. Louis, there were several places that you could hear ragtime, and not just in bars. People started playing it in their homes, taking lessons at the department stores that sold pianos or sold sheet music. Scott Joplin, in all accounts, was sort of a quiet person, very introspective, but there's other ragtime artists who are very robust and very out there and was very much into promoting the music or themselves. So I think it's like regular people now, it's just musicians now. They can have very different types of personalities, and I think it was the same back then.
The blues. What is the blues? The blues is what's inside of you. It's what you live, it's what you experience. So some people think it's all about sadness, but there's uplifting blues songs. So really every last one of us has a blues story.
I hear quite a few people say, I don't like the blues. And when you say that you don't like the blues, what you're saying to me is that you haven't lived life. If you have been through something and you're going through something and you have overcome something, then you probably like the blues.
Okay. Blues is emotions, man. It's something that you feel. Okay. It's bringing out all that stuff you got in here and it put rhythm to it. It's like when bad emotions turn into good emotions. I tell you what it is. It's like when bad emotions got rhythm.
Whoa, when I grab my guitar. I don't look for no all-the-wall jive. Well, now the young man don't have the blues. How in the world we gonna keep him alive?
The blues is a musical genre that was developed by African Americans in the South as part of emotional release from the hard work and the hard situations that they had to deal with down there.
The blues is, to me, a music that came strictly from our people and from the experiences that we had from slavery even up to modern day time.
Once I became an artist, I started thinking about the relationship that blues players and all musicians have with visual artists or any other artist.
It is still that wailing and that calling and that emotional feeling and lyrics, you know, that you get. So even though some of the musical styling of it has changed, the message hasn't. Away from home, can't sleep at all. There's another mule kicking in your stall. There's evil.
Blues depicted daily struggles musically and was an exhale of expression in the 1920s, which molded itself into an art and caused political change in the city and all across the nation.
Yeah. The significance of St. Louis and the blues is the Great Migration, people leaving the South trying to make it up north to get away from oppression, blacks trying to get away from the South and find a better way of living.
St. Louis, it would stop in St. Louis, it would go to Chicago, New York, Detroit. So St. Louis was the closest major city as far as railroad systems and all, where the musicians could move about the country from the South.
Well, when they did the migration, a lot of people stopped in St. Louis. Either they ran out of money or this is where they chose to reside at. And so they took that Delta blues they had and incorporated the St. Louis Ragtime, and that developed the St. Louis Blues.
W.C. Handy wrote the St. Louis Blues in 1914, which was the first successfully published blues music. And this was a ragtime composition. So here in St. Louis, you have ragtime and blues. Scott Joplin on one hand with his ragtime, and now you have W.C. Handy's St. Louis Blues, together putting St. Louis in the national spotlight. Our professional hockey team came on, of course, later, but they adopted this name, and their logo is the Blue Note.
St. Louis Blues is known throughout the country. So you have greats, even though they're from the Delta, but Albert King calls here home, W.C. Handy, Ike Turner, even though they have Mississippi roots, because they lived in St. Louis, St. Louis calls them home, and so this is where it birthed off from here.
Today, St. Louis is the home of the National Blues Museum, where people from all over the world come to visit us every day. So you have the raw emotions of the blues, together with the syncopation rhythmic ragtime. We have the origins and the evolution of modern music.
Every genre of American music that we have has its roots in the blues.
You go into rock and roll, from Chuck Berry to the Rolling Stones. If you go overseas into Europe, all those old rock and roll bands, they will all tell you how they listen to the blues to develop their music, and they pay tribute. Rolling Stones forever had Muddy with him, so it's an influence.
You go to the jazz styles of Miles Davis, you can go to Chuck Berry and his rock and roll, go to Tina Turner and her soulful R&B, all the way up to Nelly and hip hop, and even beyond. But it all started with blues and ragtime. It's the sound of St. Louis.
My father was a man of the blues, a man on the move, and an animal, a man on the loose, equipped with the Gibson and a kettle of booze, and sped to saloons and played several sets of his music. A young man, Papa, didn't know what he was living for until a certain day he was walking to the liquor store, and in the store he heard the music of the man Muddy Waters. That day my father found the thing that he was looking for. He loved to play his Gibson. He went and had some children and raised us inside the house his whole life was built in. He hoped that one day he got to play for his grandkids. Eventually his music turned his house into a mansion. He played with his heart. You could hear him near and far. You could hear him in your room or you could hear him in the bar. He would always go and sing, but only with his 6 strings. You probably have heard of him. My dad was B.B. King.
Peace.